I'm not going to read from the first chapter. I want to read a bit later on. Excuse me. It reached a stage. Of course, the novel is largely about old people, elderly people, looking back and living their present lives. And this is about Alan, who is married to Rosemary and has been married to her for a very, very long time. They have children and grandchildren. And but he has met the love of his life when they were both 18. And they were separated, they were parted as things. They both went off to university. And he's met her again, and his love has been revived, which is causing him great happiness and joy and pain and fear. Because what is he going to say to his wife? Anyway, there we are. So I'm going to read 2 or 3 pages from this point. So Alan and Rosemary and Daphne, whom he has met again after so long. At no time in his life before had Alan ever concentrated his thoughts on one person in one situation and done so for day after day. He thought of Daphne when falling asleep, and Daphne was the first to come to mind when he awoke. He set her in her house and saw her moving among the rooms, even those rooms he had never yet seen. He saw her walking up Hamilton Terrace and walking along St. John's Wood Road, stopping sometimes to talk to some faceless neighbour. He saw her reclining on the sofa where they had lain, a book in her hand, and then she laid the book aside to think, perhaps, of him. Most of all, when dwelling on her, he was asking himself what they were going to do. Would the sort of promise she had made him ever come true? It was so unlikely. He was too old, and this too had to be faced. She was too old. People didn't fall in love at their age, but they do. He had supposed and in a way hoped that setting eyes on Rosemary after he returned from his visit to Hamilton Terrace would bring guilt, enormous guilt. He might, he had considered while sitting in the tube, even feel a kind of relief that Rosemary's presence, Rosemary's existence, would show him his and Daphne's folly, the impossibility of what they had half planned to do, and the sheer wrongness of it. But this had passed in a moment to be replaced by a thought that it would be wrong, even if possible now, to dismiss this joy he and she contemplated. It was something he would bitterly regret for the rest of what life remained to him, telling himself that he would be a useless companion to Rosemary now, no husband, a shell, his whole mind and heart given to another woman, even if he looked like the man she was married to. That was a hypocritical let-out. Rosemary was a good woman, he repeatedly told himself, devoted to him, a homemaker, his career, the mother of his children. And a small voice inside him said that of all that, only the last was true. An image of the sewing machine appeared in his mind's eye. A song from some musical had been about the sewing machine being a girl's best friend. How ancient that seemed, how antediluvian. Rosemary's sewing machine had been his worst enemy. The sound it made, that buzz that was like any other, got increasingly on his nerves. No other woman he knew possessed a sewing machine, though many had done so when he was young. The only other one he knew of was in the dry cleaners they patronized in the high road, where a woman in a sari sat in the window stitching seams. How grossly unfair he was being. He couldn't leave Rosemary anyway, it was unthinkable. Yet he was thinking of it as often as he thought of Daphne. He continued to make his excuse of a meeting with Robert Flynn, though growing aware that he would have to think of some alternative reason for going out with without Rosemary. Now he needed a new pretext, this time, for staying away overnight. Lying, which he had once believed he found difficult if not impossible, had become simple, largely because, and this was an additional trouble to him, his hero was so innocent and so trusting. That made untruthfulness so much more outrageous. Yet he and Daphne couldn't go on as they were, kisses and afternoon visits, however delightful. He knew himself and was aware that for him love-making should take place at night time. Not necessarily in the dark, but at least in artificial light. And in a bed if possible, not on a sofa. It was his age. Wasn't it true that for this fundamental aspect of our being, for sex and love, we want the circumstances, the setting, and the very sounds and scents of our youth? That may well be why some marriages endured more or less forever. He thought, as he often did, of Daphne's father's car at dusk on Baldwin's Hill. The smell of her now was the same, the feel of her. She was the first woman he had had, and would, if all could miraculously go well, be the last. He would be found out through Robert Flynn. That was why he must think of another excuse. He thought of all this as he told his usual lie to Rosemary and set off for Loughton Station. Robert would phone, or his wife would, or someone else who knew them both would phone, and tell Rosemary that Robert was complaining he never saw Alan these days. Coming home in late evening, he often thought of that. But he need not think of it now. Not now. Risotto is a dish notoriously difficult to make, or if not that difficult, time-consuming. Once you have started it with your rice and mushrooms, say, in the pan, stock added, and more stock waiting to be added, you cannot leave it. Constant stirring is essential, or disaster ensues. The chef at Lotario's restaurant in St John's Wood High Street was a superb cook, and his risotto was famous, thanks in part to culinary features in glossy magazines. The restaurant was always full by 8:30, but those who booked for 7, the locals and the elderly mostly, found space and soft music, pink tablecloths and napkins, always the best colour, and courteous service, and of course, the risotto. Freya and David had been visiting the flat in the block opposite Lord's, of which they now had possession. They would move into Oak Tree Court on the following Saturday, but today they were measuring windows for blinds and calculating whether the second bedroom would take a queen-size bed. They arrived there later than they had expected, and once inside made 2 discoveries. The previous occupants had removed all the light bulbs, and they themselves were highly incompetent, both with tape measures and rulers. Near quarrelling, they sought their usual remedy for ill temper, sat down on the newly carpeted floor and drank a couple of glasses each of the bottle of Merlot they had brought with them. This restored their equilibrium, and as it was getting on 8:30 and growing dark, they set off to find a restaurant. "Why not try Lotario?" said Freya. "He's the man who makes the marvellous risotto." "I hate risotto." "Well, then you can have something else." The place was crowded. They hadn't booked, but one table was available to them. The sort no one wants because it is just inside the door and liable to draughts. "I think we should have a pink tablecloth like these, don't you?" said Freya, who had something of her grandmother in her. David was not a talkative man, something which seldom bothered her. They ordered another bottle of Merlot, risotto for Freya, spaghetti vongole for David. He was not a people watcher either, in her opinion, like most men. Her eyes roved around the diners and came to rest on a couple seated at a table diagonally opposite theirs. The man was facing them, and the woman had her back to them. Far from young, or even in their middle years, they might have been described as in the prime of old age. Straight-backed, and both with good heads of hair, it seemed as if they had finished eating, but 2 half-full glasses of wine were still in front of them. The man, whom Freya immediately recognized, had his right hand covering the woman's left hand across the tablecloth, and now he raised it to his lips. Freya said faintly, "I don't believe it." That always means you do. You see those people, the woman in the black and white, that old man with her is my grandfather. Do you want to go over and say hello? Are you kidding? Their food came, the risotto and the spaghetti vongole. Freya took a larger than usual swig of wine. "I rather hope they don't see us. That isn't my grandmother, you know." "Some business acquaintance, I expect." "He doesn't have a business." David smiled, then laughed. "Well, good luck to him. It isn't funny." The old man was paying his bill. They finished their wine, got up and began walking towards the door, quite a long way from Freya and David, who kept their eyes downcast. But in Freya's case, not enough to avoid seeing their departure. "Did you see that?" she said as the door closed behind them. "He had his arm round her like they were young." Maybe they feel young. It upset me a lot. I feel sort of disillusioned. I mean, I never dreamed of anything like that. Not Grandad. It's not our business, Freya. "Of course it is. He's my Grandad. I really need a drink. Something stronger than that red stuff. A grappa. Do you want one?" "I'm okay. It doesn't upset me." "Next time," said Alan, "I'll stay the night." Good. Daphne wouldn't want to know how he would manage to stay the night, what far greater prevarication would have to be employed, what far bigger lie be told to explain his absence for perhaps 24 hours. Not Robert Flynn this time. Alan was growing frightened of Robert Flynn, of this innocent and blameless man might suddenly surface like a monster from a calm sea, rear his ugly head, though Alan remembered him as rather a handsome man, and gnash his shark-like jaws, robbing his quarry of an arm or a leg. For to lose Daphne now would be like the loss of a limb. Of all that Robert Flynn might do, he must not be allowed to take Daphne from Alan, better break up his marriage. But that was already broken, wasn't it? Worries, mostly related to Robert Flynn, whose function as an alibi Alan felt he had overused, beset him all the way home in the tube train. He even envisaged walking into the flat and finding not just a wakeful Rosemary sitting there, but also Robert Flynn and his wife, whatever she was called, the three of them assembled to examine his lies and excuses and confront him with them. Of course, there was nothing of the sort. Rosemary was in bed and presumably asleep, and the copper-coloured silk suit, finished at last, was on a hanger in the hallway. Somebody will have some questions, I think. But take your time. Somebody has a question.
Is Wexford still alive and well?
I think so. I don't live with him. I'm not in his confidence, but I think that he too, rather like Robert Flynn, will surface and snap perhaps. Yeah, in a year or so.
Question. I've been emailing a psychiatrist that I know the last couple of days about Bill Cosby scandal, and I had referred to him as a sociopath, and she said she didn't think that was a good description of him. And I'm wondering, since you write about a lot of people who have personality disorders, do you make a distinction between a sociopath and a psychopath? I'm not quite sure what the difference is.
Well, I never think about it.
You don't think about it? Okay.
No, I don't think, not in that sort of sense. I don't know whether such people are psychopaths. I don't even know what a sociopath is.
Okay.
Somebody who doesn't sort of fit in with society, I suppose.
Okay, all right.
But I don't know. And I don't think that writing as I do is necessary for me to know
Okay.
something like that.
All right. Okay, I was just curious because it's...
No, I don't make a distinction because I just don't know.
Okay,
It doesn't seem to matter to me.
okay.
But I have a follow-up to that. Your awful people, your murderers and things, often are in some ways sympathetic. It's almost a little bit Shakespearean. There's always that dichotomy in the characters, never anything just completely pure evil. Can you talk a little bit about that and why you do that?
Well, I suppose I think I have never known anyone that I could say was pure evil, as far as I know. But I don't think so. I think it's a bit over the top. It's a bit melodramatic. I think that people must be. They're all right with their own families. They're all right with their children and so on. But they may be very bad. But I haven't known them. And you know, when I'm writing, I don't think about that sort of thing. Not really. I just think that this is somebody that is a character in my book, is apparently quite unpleasant, but maybe not. Maybe all right. You see, we don't know on the whole evil people, do we? I don't think we do. We know people we don't like, and that is usually enough for us. We don't like them, and that's it. So in that case, if we aren't related to them, or foolishly enough married them or something, and mostly we haven't, we don't have to think about them. We don't concern ourselves with them. We might maybe one of them ourselves, but we don't know that. I don't think so. Now then, I'm monitoring this myself, which I'm not very good at. Yes.
Well, I wanted to thank you so much for beautiful reading and for thousands of hours of just delightful reading through the years. So thank you so much. And I wanted to know, in terms of, it might be a naive question, but the genesis of your stories, does it just kind of come to you as like a flash of insight, oh, I'm going to write a story like this, or do you sit down and kind of concentrate on a certain topic until something comes to you?
I think that, the last thing, that wouldn't work at all. It would never work for me. I suppose I can best give you an example of how I have thought of various books. I wrote a book which is mostly about the London Underground. It was Barbara Vine, of course, and it's called King Solomon's Carpet. And that, I actually got that idea when I was in the Tube. See, I like the London Tube. I quite like being in it, and I do tend to go into it at times when it's not very crowded. But I realised, well, why don't I write a book about that is both the history of the London Tube, which would be quite reasonably easy to do with research, and also about people who live near to the line and use the tube a lot. I got quite excited and I started walking up and down the tube looking and thinking, and I did do that. So that was that one, and all the other incidents, the other, the subplots and the other parts of the tube story, they unfolded after a time. And so I did it, but I started to write it quite soon, and then I did all the research, which is often quite enjoyable, very enjoyable, and it was. And I had then I wrote again another Barbara Vine, the Grasshopper, which of course is about pylons and about tall roofs. I just moved to where I now live, where there are tall houses in London, in Maida Vale. And I thought, well, what about having a group of young people who all get together and want to climb up on the roofs and walk along them? And so that was how that happened. And other stories, other ideas came, but I think that the best of my books came like that. Not conscious, not looking, hunting for a theme or a plot. That doesn't really work. I shall never do that again.
Yeah.
Hi. Thank you so much for reading and being here tonight. I started reading Wexford when I was a teenager, and then I turned to Fine when I got older. And Fine's my favorite, and I've read many of the books several times, and even tried to document the plots. And House of Stairs, Asta's story, and the one about the writer who denied his past and his relationship with his brother inadvertently, all really profoundly changed how I looked at fiction and how it was constructed. And I wondered how you were able to go back into the past to find something that brought together the lives of people who were the characters that you're really following, who are living, as opposed to the people who had preceded them and have died, and how you managed to make that come alive.
Well, of course, I don't know. I think if you look back into your own life, as I look back into mine, I don't know how we do these things. I think if you do look back and you want to recreate the past or remember the past, you try and you succeed and you can get some idea. You may not be recreating it as it was, but that's all right, because you can achieve something that way, and that's what I have done, and we'll do again. I like doing that. It's interesting. It may not be accurate, but that doesn't matter. It doesn't have to be accurate. It just has to be a recreation that you feel will convince your readers. And that's how that comes about.
Noreen, back up here. Yeah. Someone back there?
Oh yeah. Regarding your characters and how you get into their mind, I'm thinking of the Crocodile Bird and all of them really, but it's astounding to me just how you get into the mind of the criminal or the victim. And I was wondering, have you ever spent time interviewing people in criminally in insane asylums or in prisons? Because it's just astounding how you get so into the mind of that person. It seems almost, to me, it's almost like impossible that you can create this just from your mind. The way they, they're so authentic. And so I wonder, how do you get that kind of authenticity?
Well, of course, again I have to say, I don't know. See, there are a lot of things I don't know. I know that I want to do that. I want to get into people's minds. I want to try to be how they are and think about how they think and how they act and why. But if I'm successful, I'm glad. But I don't know how I do it. I don't know what I'm doing. And I think this applies to a lot of writers. You want very much to create a real background, a real happening, a thing. This is the way it must have been, and this is the way this man thought, or I would have thought. But if you're succeeding at it, you don't know. You just hope. You try. And that's all. This may not be very satisfactory to you, but it's the best I can do.
So they're not based on people that you may have known? Or?
No, never. But except that when you say that, and I always say that because I don't consciously go and pick on somebody I know. And yet, when we say, no, it's not based on anybody, if it's not based on anybody, what is it? It must have some connection with real people. So I think probably the truth is, I take bits of people that I have known and put them with other people and make a character that way. I'm not aware of it, but if that isn't so, I must be taking them from characters on television, which would be awful. I don't think I do.
Yes.
Do you feel that your writing style has changed much over the years? Are you conscious of any sort of differences?
I hope so. I hope it got better. I hope it's got more convincing. I hope people would appreciate a character and think, yeah, this is a real person. I can understand this person. I've never known anybody like them, but I can believe that it's possible. That's all you can do, I think. I don't know how else. But I think you have to have a character that, let's take a woman, a middle-aged woman who's living in a house that's in an area that you know, and you've got to think about her. And of course, as you begin to create her, you've got to think, what does she do? She doesn't work. She has no job. She's like this character, Rosemary. She's got a sewing machine, and she sits at it and she makes clothes. And you think about them, does she make them well? No, she doesn't. She's not very good. You see, her husband hates them. He would like to, he doesn't want to hurt her feelings, but he would like to stop her doing this. He would like to encourage her to buy her clothes, because now he can easily afford that. They can afford it. And so you begin to get a character that is coming up. And of course, she's quite a good cook and a housekeeper, and she wants to look after him. But sometimes she senses that he feels this and she resents it. So you've got a character is already forming here. You see what she's like. She's a good mother, but her children are grown up now. She likes her grandchildren partly because, of course, she feels she ought to. A lot of people do. And then you've got another aspect of her. He doesn't feel that. He's a man. And he may love the children, but he also finds them a terrible nuisance. He's an old man. He doesn't want 3- and 4-year-olds climbing all over him and falling off the balcony. So you've already got people there who are saying you, they speak, and so you give them, they must speak in the way they would because they're old. So to some extent they speak as they would have spoken when they were young, and they haven't adopted the new terms that people use, the new conversation, the new way of speaking. And so there again you have the character. And by this time you've got two people, just two people for instance, who have strong characters that you can see. There they are on the page and you can read them. And if they were not like that, if they changed, you would sense it and the reader wouldn't want to read about them. But they would not be real. But the reader wants to come upon real people. Of course, they never will be real people because you would have to be a great genius to create real people. You don't. But you create something that's pretty well like real people. That sort of thing. Yeah, that's all you can do.
That's a very basic sort of question, but when Noreen introduced you, she talked about that you were a crime writer that sort of blurred the edge between literary and crime, and I know that there are people who've said to me, well, I don't read crime, but I read Ruth Rendell. What do you think of yourself as a crime writer, and if so, what attracted you to writing about crime or a criminal mind?
Well, there are two questions there. I don't think of myself, I just think of myself as a fiction writer. I don't think of myself that way. I wasn't attracted to crime. It happened to be the first book that a publisher accepted, which was a good crime novel that I wrote really to see if I could. But it's not that what I can do is suspense. And that I must do. It's essential for what I write. So that's what you can say I do. I'm not attracted by crime. I certainly wouldn't want to write books about violent crime, and so the whole book was devoted to the commission of a crime and getting away with it, and perhaps because I would want to bring something else into it as well. And but I'm successful as a crime writer because I think I can create suspense and I can make my readers long to know what's going to happen. They want to keep on turning the page. They want to know how this is going to work out, and that's really it.
Yes, I've noticed in a few of your books over the years a theme of like missing or kidnapped children. Is that something that you've consciously chosen to write about, or that it just sort of happens to come up?
I think happens to come up is probably right. No, I'm not. I wouldn't want to write about the killing of a child. I wouldn't want to write, certainly wouldn't want to write about the torment of a child, the torture of a child, or much of the suffering of a child. It goes against the grain with me very much. But I've written about missing children because I do think that is a theme that makes for great interest, and people wonder, well, what is going to happen? What happens to this child? Is he or she going to be discovered? What will come out of it? And that, I think, is something that must fascinate any crime writers or suspense writers.
Just in this brief reading that you did this evening, in these very few pages, there were lots of instances of very funny writing, great humor. Is humor something you consider indispensable, an important part of your writing? Does it happen by accident because it's just so consistent with the moment or the scene or the person? Or do you seek it out? How do you feel about it?
I like to be funny if I can. That is the answer. I do. There's no conscious looking for it, hunting for it, thinking this must be. I like to be funny. I find many amusing sides to life.
We have time for 2 more questions. Yes.
What authors have influenced you early in your career and today?
I read a lot. I read all the time. I'm always reading. And I read so many different authors that I can't say. I just don't know. There are some I like better than others. But, you know, I'm reading at the moment, I'm reading Thomas Hardy's The Return of the Native. I read it before, and I don't really remember it, and I'm enjoying it very much. And I just bought the new Ian McEwan, and I'm going to read that, but maybe on the flight going home. But I might read it before that. Very likely I will. And I will. I may acquire more books before that, and I will have a lot to read on the plane because I cannot be without something to read. But whether these books have influenced me, I don't know.
And one more? Anyone? Yes.
Yes, I have a question about the Wexford TV series. I've seen all of them, and ever since I've seen them, when I read your books again and again, his is the face that's in my mind. And I was just wondering how you feel about that. Are you happy with him? Are you happy with the series?
Well, I'm happy with George Baker taking that part.
Right.
He was very good, and almost more with Christopher Ravenscroft as Burden. But I've never been very much involved with the television. I think that I was lucky to have 2 such good actors, and they were fine. But apart from that, I didn't much like any of the stuff that has been done with my books on television, but except that those two were very good. And of course George is dead, and so there were no more made. And maybe they shouldn't go on making these series. I don't think so. But these were good.
Okay, all right, thank you so much.